worst thing about Gone Home is that it's only ever used as an example. Every time this game is discussed, people always seem to gravitate towards the extreme of it being one of the greatest stories ever told in video games, or some walking simulator that's not even a video game. Well, let's set the record straight, kids. Gone Home is most assuredly a game, but it's not a great one. Now, I went into this as best I could. Obviously, I'm very late to the party, and with a name like Pissant Pit, you just know it's going to be an even-tempered guy looking to give a game like this a fair shake. In all seriousness, I took my time with this game, and I did my best to explore as much as I could and take in as much as I could. I really wanted to be surprised by this game, honestly. I wanted it to tell a good story and to create a cool place for me to explore.
Sometimes you just have to lie to Mom and Dad. Like when Lonnie asked me to see a band with her.
So let's kick things off with a few things that pleasantly surprised me. First up, the audio logs. They found a person with a lot of passion to read this stuff, and got someone who was generally a good voice actor. She did a good job even when the material she was working with wasn't the best. You kinda have to sell having a teenage girl whine her teenage problems for an hour. Whoever they got to yap that shit deserves a pat on the back. I also liked learning the little things about the people in the house. It's all the small touches that you just kind of stumble into or piece together that I thought was really cute. I especially liked uncovering all the ups and downs of your dad's career, because I feel like you had to do a little legwork to piece it all together. I also like how you see that Sam has been writing about the same character her whole life throughout grade school, middle school, and high school. Exploring the house, and I mean really looking to pick up every book and scrap of paper you find, creates these interesting pieces for the player to put together without having it beaten over their head. It would have been easier to just say she likes writing or that your dad has a rough career in a monologue or something, but they managed to pack in a lot of little touches that make shit feel real. Next up, that's all the good stuff. Alright, while the details of the presentation had plenty of high points, the main event was kind of amateurish. It just has all the hallmarks of your typical by-the-books gay romance story, hitting a little too many of the tropes to feel personal or really unique. They managed to make so much of these characters feel unique, but the meat and potatoes stories just felt a little too, by the book. Even a little cringy at some points. Of course, Sam's the fish out of water who just moved here and gravitates towards this girl. Of course, she's into quirky interests like video games and riot girl music. And of course the parents don't approve and say all the things you'd expect disapproving parents to say. It's strange that a game that's ostensibly about pushing boundaries is relying on such tired stereotypes. I also don't feel that exploring this house was any more impressive than exploring pretty much any house in most open world games. Seriously, just take a house, any house from an Elder Scrolls game, and really think what Gone Home did that they didn't. These unique touches that make a space feel lived in and teach you about the world you're in aren't new. This shit's been happening since I went to a house in Morrowind, and I realized that it was owned by cultists because there was nothing but human meat on the table. Just think about how much you can learn about the occupants of a house in an Elder Scrolls game, just from the sort of books they have in their house. And then consider that you can read these books to learn about the lore in the world you're actually occupying. Like, shit, you can read it about gods and demons and then know exactly what to expect when you fucking meet them in person 100 hours later. There's a whole world outside that this house is just a tiny part of. But there's every bit the detail in that house as there is in the rest of the world. What I'm trying to get at is that there is no bigger world outside of the house in Gone Home, so it really should have done its damnedest to make this the most impressive, lore-filled house in video game history. Instead, it seems to just be about on the level. You find bits of paper, you root around books, you find items that tell you things about the people who own them. I'm just not impressed by this because I'm not going to pretend I haven't seen this exact same thing when I go inside a house in New Vegas and I see a lot of empty Nuka-Cola bottles. The sentiment of, oh, this person drinks a lot of Nuka-Cola, and oh, this person is struggling with their sexual identity, are presented in the same way and end up hitting me in the same video gamey way. The house also just isn't an impressive environment to explore. I was going into this expecting a meticulous and staggering level of detail, but it just sort of feels like a Half-Life 2 mod. Seriously, it's like someone slapped this together in Gmod. Props just sort of dot the landscape here and there, and there's a lot of redundancy when it comes to exploring. You'll find a cassette, and oh, you'll put it in the cassette player exactly as planned. However, you try to go off the grid and do something as simple as pour a glass of water, and the fucking background to this little play just wobbles and falls over. What Fulbright needs to realize is that if you're going to use a smaller space, then that space needs to be executed in mind-blowing detail. You have to do something a little more interesting than, making me able to pick up every tampon I find. The biggest problem I have with this game is probably the way it uses the voiceovers. In games like System Shock and Bioshock, voiceovers were a revolutionary development because as a player, you're always busy doing other more exciting shit and can't be bothered to stop for a few seconds to read something. You're a busy murderer with a lot of ground to cover, so you just pop a tape in and keep walking. Here, this game is only about listening, reading, and looking. The game isn't rushing you through anything and has made a point to allow you to take as much time as you need to stop and listen. This means things get kind of awkward when you activate a voiceover and you end up finding something else. You're listening to someone tell you a piece of the story, and now you're holding an entirely different piece of the story waiting to read it. The game ends up not setting a pace for itself, and a lot of times I just found myself sitting there idly waiting for the void clip to end, so I could read something without a distraction. The game's narrative sort of trips over its own feet. Oh, and in an utterly game-like twist, Gone Home also tries to shove in puzzles every so often, and it's nothing short of jarring. I don't know why they couldn't stick to their guns and just make this a game about walking around a house. Was some thick-rimmed glasses-wearing motherfucker breathing down their neck telling them to throw in, like, 3 puzzles to appease the hardcore crowd? At one point, you're asked to consult a map of this ordinary human house, which you have for some reason, because, duh, who doesn't carry a map of their fucking house around with them, to find 3 secret wall panels scattered around this house, which now aren't secret because they're right on the surreal house map that you carry around on your person at all times. You immediately go from hearing about how intimate the feeling of another person's hair is to, haha, it's fucking Fez! Oh, and what appeal is this supposed to have for people who aren't into video games? We'd like to believe that a game like this has a broad appeal because its subject matter is something that normal people are supposed to relate to, but it's only really playable if you have a very conventional set of expectations for how video games work. The game assumes so much about what you know about typical video game exploration that I doubt that someone going into this cold as their first video game experience would be able to play it. I went to an event in a museum about video games and watched some poor schlubs try to play Passage in the Path, and they were absolutely fucking mystified about what they were supposed to do or what the point of the game was. Gone Home is a game for gamers who want to act like little rebels and pretend that they're playing this mass-appealing story about this wonderful personal tale of love. You're just playing a gutted version of Minerva's Den, you fucks! Wake up, sheeple! The moral of Gone Home is that if you're going to make art, any kind of art, about a tiny aspect of what every other great work in the medium already does, you gotta make sure you're actually doing it better than everyone else. Gone Home is the artistic equivalent of doing a photography project called Sunsets on the Beach, and then taking like one picture. Go big or Gone Home. Gone Home earns 2 stars out of 5 for kind of making me feel bad about a gay baby. Or something.